This year I signed up to something I never thought I'd do. Having exclusively bouldered for the last 6 years, sport climbing was neither in my skill set or my comfort zone. When our friends suggested I take the leap from bouldering to sport climbing for a trip to the Spanish mountains, my initial reaction was fear, the same feeling that had always stopped me before. But the pictures from their previous trips looked like Instagram gold, and the promise of sunshine and sangria broke my resolve. For a short stint, Hannah and I ditched the bouldering pads and we donned our harnesses, ready to take on the world of sport climbing. We had 10 weeks to learn the ropes, trying our best to overcome shaky legs when lead climbing and a serious lack of endurance. It was early March by the time we flew to El Chorro, and I felt prepared, but we still hadn't climbed outside. Our suitcase was full of quick draws that we'd never actually used.
Queremos ofrecer un saludo a nuestros clientes Iberia Plus y de la Alianza One World.
El Chorro is a small village in southern Spain that sits on the doorstep of the Garganta del Chorro, a 4-kilometre gorge that's created a diverse set of steep walls and ridges throughout the region. The gorge and the nearby cliff faces are now decorated with hundreds of bolted climbing routes. Although we'd practiced the basic skills indoors, the outdoor sport climbing experience presents a few new challenges that we spent our first few days working through. We were trusting our lives in our gear, and that's not something we were ever used to doing as boulderers. You see, sport climbing is a little bit more complicated than bouldering. In bouldering, there's you, and there's a boulder. All you really need is a bouldering mat to soften your fall, and shoes to help you grip the rock. You'll probably want a beanie hat too. You don't usually climb more than about 5 metres off the ground. Sport climbing, on the other hand, has been designed for routes that are much, much longer. You need a rope and a harness to safely ascend these routes, and that means you need a partner too. These routes are always marked by a set of permanent bolts that have been drilled into the rock. As you climb up the route, you'll reach one of these bolts every few metres, and that's why you carry these, quick draws. Every time you reach a bolt, you put one end of the quick draw into the bolt, and the other end of the quick draw attaches to your rope. That means you're effectively anchored onto the wall. If you were to fall, you're only going to fall a short distance because your rope catches on the last bolt that you clip. Our first learning curve in El Chorro was to place our own quick draws. Indoors, they're normally placed for you. And second, we had to clean a route, and that's when you collect all of your quick draws on the way back down. We were really lucky to be climbing with an experienced group who helped guide us through our first few routes. Hannah had avoided cleaning a route on her first day, so by the second day it was becoming more and more difficult for her to trust herself to tie the right knots at the top of the route.
My goal was to clean the route, and that is what I'm about to do. Do we need anything else?
Slings, a draw,
I've dribbled on myself.
chalk. Yeah, cool.
Finally plucked up the courage to clean the route, which seems ridiculous, but I was really scared of it.
My biggest goal for the week was to get comfortable on new terrain, and that was getting closer and closer with every route. Truth be told, I had also set 1 or 2 targets for my climbing level too. As much as anything, they offered something to aim for. They would encourage me to grip my teeth during laps of the circuit board, or to add one more set onto the end of my hangboard routine. I had this idea in mind that I wanted to lead a 6B outside, and if that was possible, I wanted to try a 7A. I had no idea how realistic these goals were. I'd never led a 7A indoors, and I'd never even led a 6A outdoors. But after a few days climbing, I felt able to push myself a little bit harder, knowing that it was probably a mental battle rather than a physical one that stood in the way of my goals. I was lucky that Liam, one of our friends, had some pretty similar goals too, which meant we could work together. By Tuesday afternoon, which was our second day out on the rock, we found a 6B with a clear crux section, perfect for boulderers. The hard moves took a little bit of work, but once we found our way through the tough midsection, the path to the top was pretty steady going, and it handed us both a big confidence boost for the rest of the week.
It's a video.
Psyched to lead that 6B. Definitely felt scarier than the other one.
Huh?
Psyched to lead that 6B.
Definitely felt scarier than the other one.
Definitely felt scarier than the other one. It was a lot more sustained. So on the other one, once you'd done the crux, there was like one bit where you're above the boulder doing a hard move. Whereas on this one, there were like 3 or 4 bits where you're above the bowl, but you were only doing like semi-hard moves. But
Just
probably
semis.
a bit mentally harder because you have to keep doing them and get really pumped all the way up.
Yeah.
I guess I was buoyed by that success because the next day I'd made plans to meet Liam underneath one of El Chorro's classic 7A routes. The Puerma de Roca cave dominates the central section of the Frontalas crag. We had our eyes set on the cave's central line, a 23-metre romp up overhanging tufas, which gives the cave its name, Puerma de Roca. We pitched up at the crag late in the afternoon, and 2 of our bunkmates from the olive branch were already set up on the route. This is Jordan, and Jordan ate nothing but eggs and chorizo for the entire week, but still crushed hard every day. Jordan and Anna were happy to let us share the route, which saved us from placing our own quick draws and gave us a little bit of time to study exactly how to move between each clip. Against a pretty perfect backdrop, we felt out the route one section at a time. There was only time for one proper go before the sunset, but we both made all of the moves, clipping the top bolt after several rests. We kind of sensed it was a real test of endurance, but none of the individual moves were out of reach.
Nice, Nick.
At the top of the cave, I just remember relaxing into my harness and looking out at the view, and this felt like one of the moments that I'd been waiting for all trip, really finding out what sport climbing was all about. We talked about the route all the way back down to our bunkhouse, over dinner and into the night, and from this point on, the idea was really planted for Liam and I that this was a route we could both do. The thing was, it wasn't so much the moves that needed refining, it was a case of finding the best spots to rest so that I could recover mid-route. We hiked back to the cave early on Friday, just before the morning light started to creep round the mountains. I was trying to recall the moves one by one. The benefit of projecting such a popular route is the overload of information that you can find online from other climbers who have tried the route. Patched together from YouTube videos, logbook comments, and my own memory of the moves, I had a kind of imagined topo in my mind's eye. The route started by scrambling up a slab, leading to the first 2 clips, and then a perfect recovery in a small alcove on your left.
You alright?
The ledge was big enough to have a picnic on,
You look a bit shell-shocked.
but unfortunately it comes before any of the hard sections. From there, you move up steep hanging tufas, reaching slightly leftwards via long moves, but it's all on positive holds. You reach the bottom of a really big tufa, which kind of curves outwards towards you, and this is the second rest. But I remembered I could do a clip outright first, then take a step backwards and find a way to wrap my legs around the tufa, taking as much weight out of my arms as I could. Moving back outright past a large square pocket, you hit another tufa feature, and this takes you upwards for a few metres with the help of a second tufa slightly higher and on your left. Eventually this brings you out at a small crimp for your left hand, and this marks the point which you start moving right. The move out right was a lunge to a big ledge, but it was a few feet above the bolt, so I wasn't entirely comfortable doing it. The jug is a really big relief when you catch it, and it allows for a moment or two's rest, but I wasn't planning to hang around on this steep terrain. After this, it was time to dig in. You head directly to the top via several friendly pockets, but the top only comes into sight after a mantle, which I guess is unusual for a sport climb, but it was pretty standard for a boulderer like me. The sloping lip was sapping,
Yes!
but it felt much easier if you hit the hidden right hand side pull
Nice
and
one!
the left hand scoop before walking your feet up on polished edges. It's a lot to take in for a boulderer, but when we dropped our bags underneath the route, it was pretty much as I imagined it. So Liam had beaten me at darts the night before, which meant that I'd drawn the short straw and I had to place all the quick draws. In a way, I was kind of grateful to be able to spend more time on the route, and it helped me to slowly warm up by just climbing bolt to bolt one at a time, few moves, without getting too pumped. I knew that Liam had a good chance to top the route on his first go,
Come on, Liam!
but I was pretty taken back when he just absolutely cruised up it. And I actually felt a bit less anxious now that one of us had sent it, because we were all just proper buzzing. The first moves felt fairly comfortable as I worked my own way up, stopping by the early cave to collect my thoughts and kind of slow down my breathing. I really tried to focus on the moment and just enjoy the climbing. I pulled up through the overhanging tufas, and I didn't hit everything perfectly, but I stayed calm enough that I could keep moving quickly when I did find the right holds. Past the large square pocket, I clipped the bolt, ready for my second rest, then sidestepped back onto my makeshift chair. And for the first time, I actually found a resting position that felt secure. I probably waited here for 3 or 4 minutes at least. When I started up the parallel tufas again, I could feel the flow of the route without having to think too hard. The transition from the left-hand crimp to the big holds outright had felt sketchy before, but this time I had a new kind of focus that normally kicks in whenever I'm committed to sending a route or a boulder. I caught the big ledge dead on and scrambled across the holds, crossing my hands over to make best use of its juggy lip, then pausing for a second to gear up for the final sapping moves. There wasn't much in my mind at this point, but I definitely felt a quick wave of excitement when I realised that I was capable of putting it all together. If not this go, then maybe the next go or the one after. I was prepared to battle over the mantle using knees, shins and elbows, but thankfully it didn't come to that. I found my hidden handholds at the first time of asking, and I hauled myself onto the end platform where the last bolt was waiting.
Yes, Nathan, go on!
so things planned out pretty much as well as they could have in El Chorro. We left with a few new friends and maybe a new hobby too. I will say that I found the new challenges a lot more mentally draining than physically, but there was a long-lasting satisfaction in knowing how far Hannah and I had made it in 10 weeks, and that we've got a few more pictures and videos to look back on fondly.